remember in 1996 or 97, there was a Veer Savarkar movie also, which my mum took me for. And it's one of my earliest memories in life.
Acha.
I think it's got Anu Kapoor, if I'm not mistaken. He plays Veer Savarkar. And it's a Malayalam film that's dubbed in Hindi.
Okay.
And I highly recommend people watch it because they've shown a very raw image of him. They've shown him in Kalapani, which was the jail in the Andamans.
Yeah.
They used to make the prisoners do a oil extraction.
Kolhu ka bell punishment.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love for you to expand on it as well. But it's basically like a sort of a torture technique where they make you extract oil from seeds.
Yeah.
And then when he doesn't comply and he doesn't give them information about the Indian Revolution, they actually tie him upside down on the extraction device and make sure his head rubs against the ground and he gets dragged along with the machine and his body is used to actually extract the oil from the seeds.
Yeah.
And I saw this as a 4-year-old, man.
Wow.
Yeah. I was just like, whoa, what has gone on in this country before I got here? But it gave you a very dark image of the Indian freedom struggle. And I'm sure there's so many things that don't even make it to the world of films.
Yeah.
We've written an entire book on Veer Savarkar. History books don't mention him. Very casual, random mentions. You hear about him when you live in a city like Mumbai.
Yeah.
But not as much as you should. There's a lot of Gen Zs we have watching the show, teenagers who watch this show. What's the truth about Veer Savarkar that Indians should know?
Well, here was a man who started India's first organized secret society, which was called the Abhinav Bharat. Initially Mitra Mela, which later became Abhinav Bharat. He led the first ever student bonfire against foreign clothes. When we talk of bonfire, we only think of Gandhi and the bonfire of clothes. But in 1905, as a student of Ferguson College in Pune, this man had done that, for which he even got rusticated from college. And then 5 years that he was in London as a law student, he led literally the revolutionary movement, sitting there, and got all these other people I mentioned earlier who were there with him, Shyamji Krishna Verma and all of them, into this entire movement. And wrote this seminal book on the, after researching British documents on the 1857 uprising, gave it a respectability by calling it the first war of Indian independence. And that book, Ranveer, became literally the Bhagavad Gita for all future revolutionaries, whether it was, Bhagat Singh, who got the second edition of it published, or even Rash Bihari Bose and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, who got it translated into Tamil and Japanese and all kinds of languages, and how a revolution needs to be structured. The entire prescription was there in that book. So someone who had contributed so much, and 12 long years in Kalapani, 2 years in Indian mainland jail, so 14 years of imprisonment. And then 13 years after he comes out, he's kept under captivity and house arrest in Ratnagiri in Maharashtra, where he could not even go out of the borders of Ratnagiri. So just imagine a young man who is so wanting to become a barrister, goes to London, is caught by the British and unfairly tried, and 27 years of his life are snuffed out. His degrees are snatched away from him. The law degree, the graduation degree from Ferguson. So on paper, he was just a metric pass. His entire family property confiscated. And so when he and his elder brother go away to Kalapani, the women of the family, they literally had to beg, to eke out a livelihood. They didn't, even utensils were taken away and auctioned, literally brought to the streets. So this is a sacrifice not only of him, but also his entire family, his wife, his sister-in-law, and all of them, Yeshu Vahini, and all these people. And so easily today, sitting in air-conditioned rooms, people pass judgment saying he was a traitor, he was a stooge and all of that, which I think is grossly unfair.
What is their argument?
I mean, the fact that is mentioned that he wrote mercy petitions to buy out his, liberty from jail and so on, which I think is a flawed argument, because these were petitions that commonly a lot of political prisoners wrote those days. It was not something that exclusively he wrote. And in my book, the first volume of the 2-volume biography on Savarkar, I have mentioned all the petitions in toto. There were 6 or 7 that he wrote. So just like you can have a lawyer, or today you can have a bail application, a lot of people used to file up, these petitions which were applications. And in those petitions, your viewers can actually read those, and there was nowhere an apology. In fact, the British records themselves say that when they came, one man called Reginald Craddock, who comes all the way to interview him, he in his official jotting says, I interviewed Mr. Savarkar, and he shows no regret or repentance or remorse for what he has done. So why would the British want to write that about him if he could have prostrated and said, "Mai baap, mujhe chhod do yahan se." So, but he didn't do that. So, and then most of these petitions, he was also filing on behalf of other younger people, young revolutionaries who didn't know English, who didn't know the law. So this man was called Bada Babu, who had studied, law, and who knew English, and he could be their spokesperson. So in fact, in a 1917 petition, he says, if my name constitutes an obstacle in the release of all the other prisoners, then delete my name and release the others, and that would give me as much pleasure as my own release would secure. So that clearly shows he was talking on behalf of all the other people. But this is constantly brought out, to demonize him. And you spoke about Kala Pani, Ranveer, and the atrocities there, not only to Savarkar, but all the other. Only the revolutionaries were housed in Kala Pani, mind you. No single congressman was sent there.
Hold on, just hold this thought, because I want to go back to this debate of where does Veer Savarkar actually stand in the Indian history textbook, basically. When I was doing my research for this episode, the word that repeatedly came up along with him was Hindutva.
Yeah.
And I feel in the modern day, Hindutva doesn't mean what it actually meant back then. Like, see, now that I even use the word Hindutva, there's a lot of listeners who probably switched off because they associate Hindutva with Hindus being against other religions like Islam, Christianity, Sikhism, Buddhism, etc. And, honestly, to some degree, that is what Hindutva has become for a lot of Hindus out there today, who are against other religions, who want to have this whole Hindu nationalism thing going on in the country. But back then, I believe Hindutva meant something very different. And he was inspired by the ideals of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj.
Yeah.
And at that time, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Hindus were all fighting together. So I'm sure that there was no religious sentiment behind what he did, but I'd love to know this Hindutva angle on Veer Savarkar.
I mean, Hindutva, the way it was envisaged by him, he wrote this very slim booklet called Essentials of Hindutva, Who is a Hindu, while he was in jail. And while all his other writings were in Marathi, this was one he wrote in English for a pan-India audience, because that was the time when this very dangerous movement that was going on in the country called the Khilafat movement, which Gandhi had led with the idea of bringing Hindu-Muslim unity, but it had very dangerous ramifications. The seeds of partition were almost, I think, crystallized around that time because of the way it was led, where on a communal issue of who will sit in the as the Sultan or the Caliph of Turkey, which the British had won in war, you were bartering, Muslim support for the freedom movement. So a lot of Muslims did not participate till then in the freedom movement. The very little membership of the Congress too. So I think Gandhi's idea was, if you show them this little carrot saying it's a cause that is very dear to some of you, so we will support you for that. In return, you participate in the non-cooperation movement. Now, and in return, he had promised that within 1 year, the country will become free and we will establish a caliphate, a pan-Islamist, a very Wahhabi kind of a movement to establish a caliphate there. Why should we in India support something like that? But that was done. And when both these things did not work, his promises, there were lots of, Hindu genocides that happened in the 1920s, including the Mopla, carnage in Malabar and different parts of India. And the Hindus were almost being led like a Pied Piper to their, leading the rats to their destruction. And that's when Savarkar comes up with this document of what Hindutva is, which right at the beginning, he says this has nothing to do with the theological aspects of Hinduism as a religion or the, matters of soul, super soul, all of that. This is more of a cultural and a national identity marker, so to say. You need to have your devotion, your affiliation to this nation. Those who consider this landmass as their Punya Bhumi, not by religion, but by your affiliation. You don't care whether Turkey mein kaun sultan baith raha hai. You're thinking of this country, your Punya Bhumi and your Pitru Bhumi, your ancestral, where your ancestors come from. That person is a Hindu. He or she can be Jain, Muslim, Parsi, Sikh, whatever else, but culturally and nationally, they would be termed as a Hindu according to Savarkar.
Because they're from Hindustan.
And the world saw Al-Hind, right, from how the Persians and others saw us. This was, to this part of the world was called Hind. And so people from there were Hindu for him. Of course, that the very fact that there's a religion by the same name complicates the matter. But that was Hindutva. Hindutva is Hinduism that resists, all kinds of predatory moves on it. And also anything that looks at Hindu unification, because Savarkar's role, even in Ratnagiri, in the 13 years that I mentioned, was on caste eradication. Very few people today, Hindutva is equated with, Manuvad and all of that. While in reality, here was a man who for 13 years stood for a complete elimination of caste, not just untouchability as Gandhi was advocating, but removal of all kinds of, and unifying the entire Hindu society as one strong unit. So I think the misunderstandings that we have of this term as it grew is very unfortunate, and we tag him with whatever, as you said, today's agenda, and today politics also enters that so much, so that complicates things further.